Welcome to Roast and Reckoning, where silence ends and truth begins. My name is Ava, and I am 27 years old. Most people believe that the ultimate betrayal in a family is a loud one. They imagine a screaming match in a driveway, a door slammed so hard the plaster cracks, or a sudden, dramatic departure in the dead of night. But they are wrong. The most devastating betrayals aren't loud, they are methodical. They are the quiet, structural thefts of your identity, where the people who are supposed to be your load-bearing walls are actually the ones termites have been living in for years. They treat your successes not as the fruit of your labor, but as a communal bank account they can withdraw from whenever their favorite needs a boost. If you have to dim your light to keep him in the room, you're in the wrong room. For 27 years, I lived in that room. I lived in the shadows of a hallway lined with high-definition photos of a sister who was celebrated for simply existing, while my own blueprints, my sleepless nights, and my professional triumphs were tucked away like a shameful secret near the coat closet. I was the invisible support, the one who held up the structure of a family that was rotting from the foundation up. But there is a particular danger in overlooking the person who understands the architecture of the house. We aren't quiet because we have nothing to say, we are quiet because we are watching. We are measuring the load-bearing walls. We are identifying the stress fractures. And when the time comes, we know exactly which pillar to remove to let the whole roof fall in. Tonight, we are talking about the audacity of entitlement. We are talking about the moment a family decides that your hard-earned assets are actually communal furniture they can move into someone else's house. This is a story about a $3 million historic brownstone, a wedding dowry built on a delusion, and the cold, hard math of a reckoning that was years in the making. Grab your coffee, turn down the lights, and listen closely. Because some people don't just want a seat at your table, they want to give the table away while you're still sitting at it.my world is defined by the integrity of materials. As an architect, I spend my life thinking about weight, balance, and the physics of endurance. I know that if a foundation is shifted, even by a fraction of an inch, the entire skyscraper is eventually doomed. You can patch the cracks in the drywall, you can paint over the damp spots with expensive latex, but if the base isn't level, the collapse is a matter of when, not if. I applied that same precision to my own life. While my sister was celebrated as the star of the family, I worked in the dark. I spent my nights at the drafting table, the smell of graphite and expensive vellum my only companions. My professional success was a fortress I built with my own sweat, my own sleepless nights, and a level of discipline my family never cared to understand. By 27, I had achieved what most in my field only dream of. I owned a $3 million historic brownstone in the heart of the city. It was an Italianate masterpiece of 19th century craftsmanship. The original crown molding looked like frozen lace, hand-carved by artisans who understood that beauty requires patience. I remember the day I closed on it. I stood in the foyer, watching the late afternoon light hit the hand-laid parquet floors, turning the white oak into a sea of amber. I had spent 18 months restoring it. I had crawled through crawlspaces to inspect the load-bearing masonry. I had argued with contractors over the tensile strength of the reinforcements. I had personally stripped 12 layers of paint off the original mahogany banister until my hands bled. It was more than a house, it was a physical manifestation of my independence. I am my professional world, I am the boss. I am the one who signs the blueprints, manages the million-dollar budgets, and tells the structural engineers when their math is off. But the moment I stepped across the threshold of my parents' house for Sunday dinner, I became the invisible support again. The Addams household was a study in skewed perspective. If you walked down the main hallway, you'd see my sister's life documented in museum-quality frames. Graduation photos where she's tossing a cap into a sky she didn't have to work to reach. Photos of her first job in marketing, a position my father's friend secured for her. Every minor milestone was framed in gold. There was one photo of me. I was 9 years old, holding a trophy for a science project, a neural network classifier I'd built from scratch before I even understood what a star was. It was tucked behind the coat closet, the glass covered in a fine layer of dust, fading into the wallpaper. My sister, Chloe, is what my parents call the star. She has an easy smile and a way of making people feel like she's the most important person in the room, mostly because she's never had to worry about the person paying the bill. And then there was Caleb. Caleb came from a high-status family, the kind of family my father, Richard, a retired engineer who measured success by church bulletins and country club memberships, worshipped. My mother, Diane, loved both her children, but she loved Chloe louder. She kept the garden immaculate and the house running on a schedule, but her internal clock was always set to Chloe's time zone. I didn't mind the shadows, not really. I liked the silence of my brownstone. I liked the fact that my success was mine alone. But I had forgotten one of the fundamental rules of architecture: a structure is only as safe as its occupants are honest. And my family had been living in a house of cards for a very long time. The catalyst for the reckoning arrived on a Friday evening, dressed in the guise of a sacred family dinner. My mother's voice on the phone had that specific brightness, the kind she used when she'd already made a decision and wanted it to sound like a suggestion. "Just come, sweetheart," she said. "Your father has something he'd like to discuss. Caleb's parents will be there too. It's an occasion." I knew that tone. It was the tone of a storm brewing behind a clear blue sky. The dinner was set with my grandmother's china, the cream-colored plates with the gold edges that only appeared for occasions. The dining room smelled of rosemary pot roast and the heavy, floral scent of my mother's magnolia perfume. Richard sat at the head of the table, his jaw set like he was presiding over a court. Caleb and my sister sat across from me, looking like they'd stepped out of a lifestyle catalog, perfectly groomed, perfectly entitled, and perfectly oblivious over the roast and the expensive wine my father kept on the high shelf. The announcement was made. Chloe and Caleb were engaged. My parents were beaming, talking about the union of two great families. They talked about status. They talked about the Caleb name as if it were a royal title. And then, my father cleared his throat. He used his gavel voice, the one that allowed no interruptions, the one that assumed his word was the final blueprint. "We've been thinking about the wedding," Richard said, his fingers laced over his plate. "And we've decided on the dowry. To ensure Chloe's future and secure this marriage into the Caleb family, we are gifting them the historic brownstone. It's the right move for the family legacy." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was a vacuum that sucked the oxygen right out of the room. I sat at the foot of the table, my knife and fork paralyzed in midair. I looked at my mother. She was nodding, her eyes red with a performative loyalty. I looked at my sister, who wouldn't meet my eye, her gaze fixed on her engagement ring. I looked at Caleb, who had the easy confidence of a man who'd never been told no and was now being handed a $3 million asset he hadn't lifted a finger to earn. "The brownstone?" I asked, my voice as flat as a level on a concrete slab. "My brownstone?" "Family helps family, Ava," my mother whispered, using that guilt trip whisper she'd perfected over decades. "You're so successful. You have so much. You're the strong one. Your sister needs this to start her life properly in Caleb's circle. It's about the big picture." The audacity of the assumption was a physical weight. They weren't asking, they were telling. They had looked at my $3 million property, the product of my 80-hour work weeks, my professional sacrifices, and my literal blood, sweat, and tears, and decided it was a communal piece of furniture they could move into Chloe's life to buy her a higher social standing. They were trying to renovate my life without my permission. Relationship truth number 1. Boundaries are not suggestions. They are the load-bearing walls that keep your soul from being colonized by other people's needs. Relationship truth number 2. Entitlement is the delusion that your hard work is a shared resource, but their failures are your private burden. Relationship truth number 3. If they didn't help you lay the foundation, they don't get to hand out the keys to the front door. I didn't scream. I didn't slam my chair. I am an architect. I know that a structural failure isn't fixed by yelling at the building. I simply looked at my father and said, "I hear you." They took that as a yes. Richard smiled, the satisfied smile of a man who believes the world bends to his will. But as I drove back to my brownstone that night, the city lights sliding over my hands on the wheel like cold neon, I knew the integrity of the family structure had just hit zero. There is a kind of patience that looks like weakness. It isn't. It's the patience of an architect who knows exactly when the bridge will hold her weight and when it is destined to buckle. The following Monday, I didn't call a lawyer immediately. I called my mentor, Dr. Helena Marsh. Helena is 62, silver-haired, and has the kind of professional reputation that makes developers tremble. She had watched me build my career from a junior drafter to a firm owner. "Ava," she said, her voice steady over the phone. "I've seen this before. They think because you're the capable one, your purpose is to be the scaffolding for everyone else's weakness. You have to ask yourself, do you want revenge, or do you want your future?" "I want both," I told her. "Then be the architect," she replied. "Don't just fight them. Rebuild the reality." I began the research. I had a suspicion that this gift wasn't just a spontaneous idea born of parental love. I started digging into the paper trail. I used my professional connections to pull records I knew my parents didn't think I could access. What I discovered was a master class in fraud. My parents hadn't just offered my home, they had already begun promising it in legal discussions with Caleb's family. They had represented the property as part of the Adams family trust in preliminary marriage contracts, but that wasn't the deepest crack in the foundation. A year prior, when my father's engineering firm had gone belly up due to his own status-driven mismanagement and they were facing a humiliating bankruptcy, I had stepped in. Secretly, I had purchased the family estate, the very house they were currently sitting in, the ground they were standing on, to save them from losing everything. I had paid off the $274,000 mortgage in cash. I had placed the property under my private LLC, Bain and Adams Holdings. I had let them live there, rent-free, under the condition that they kept it between us. I wanted them to keep their dignity. I wanted them to feel safe. They had rewarded my silence by trying to steal my other property. They were leveraging the very home I had saved to secure a future for the child. They loved louder. They were selling a house they didn't own to buy a future they hadn't earned. I sat in my home office, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the math of betrayal. I created a document that I called the math of betrayal. The family's perception, the cold, hard reality, the financial truth. Ava is lucky and supported by the family name. Ava is the sole financier of the family's survival. Ava paid $274,000 to clear the family debt. The brownstone is a family asset for Chloe. The brownstone is 100% owned by Ava's private LLC. Value, $3,150,000. Richard and Diane own the family estate. Ava's LLC owns the family estate. Parents are tenants at will. Monthly rent owed, $0. Previously, Ava will stay silent to maintain family peace. Ava has the documentation to end the farce legally. Legal standing, absolute. I didn't hit send. I didn't call them. I wanted to give them one last chance to see me. I wanted to see if, at the formal dowry signing meeting they had scheduled, they would have the decency to even ask my permission. I wanted to see how far the rot went. Why do women like us stay silent for so long? We are conditioned from birth to be the sweet girls, the reliable ones, the fixers. We are told that family helps family is a one-way street where we are the pavement and they are the high-speed cars. We stay silent because we fear that speaking the truth will make us difficult. We stay silent to maintain a peace that isn't actually peace, it's just a ceasefire where we are the only ones disarmed, but silence is a form of self-betrayal. Every time you let a lie stand in the name of harmony, you are laying another brick in the prison of your own invisibility. You cannot build a future on a site that someone else is currently looting. My parents thought my silence was a yes. They thought my lack of a scream was a surrender. They didn't realize that I was simply waiting for the concrete to set. They were treating my life like a rough draft they could edit, while I was already printing the final, irreversible blueprints. In dating, in love, in family, if you are the one doing the work, you are the one who owns the results. Do not let anyone convince you that your success is a lucky break that you owe to the people who ignored you while you were building it. Earning your future is a solo mission. Stealing someone else's is a group project. The reckoning took place on a Thursday. My parents had organized a formal dowry signing at the family estate. They had invited Caleb's parents, people who smelled of old money and viewed my father as a useful subordinate. They had even hired a notary. They wanted to make the theft official. The dining room was staged for a performance. The candles were lit, the wine was poured, and the documents were laid out on the table like a sacrifice. Richard looked at me as I walked in. He didn't see a daughter, he saw a signature. "Sit down, Ava," he said, his voice dripping with that artificial paternal warmth. "Let's get this over with so we can celebrate your sister's new life." I didn't sit. I stood at the foot of the table, the same chair I had occupied when I was the invisible support holding up their fair trophies. I looked around the room. I saw the arrogance in Caleb's father's eyes. I saw the smug satisfaction on Chloe's face. I saw the cowardice in my mother's gaze. "I'm not signing anything," I said. My voice was level. It was the calm drama tone of a person who has already checked the structural integrity and knows the building is about to fall. Caleb's father, a man named Sterling, frowned. "Is there an issue with the valuation? We were told the brownstone was worth $3 million. Our agreement was contingent on that asset." "The valuation is accurate," I replied, pulling a single, brushed silver USB drive and a thick folder from my bag. "The ownership is not." I slid the folder across the table toward Sterling. I watched his hand, manicured and soft, reach for it. "In there, you will find the deed to the brownstone. It is held by my private LLC. My parents have zero legal claim to it. They cannot gift it to you because they don't own a single brick, a single piece of crown molding, or a single square inch of the parquet floors they've been bragging about." The room became a vacuum. I could hear the tap-tap-tap of the notary's pen. My sister's face went from a tan, post-vacation glow to the color of wet paper in about 3 seconds. My mother buried her face in her hands. "Ava, stop this," Richard growled, his voice losing its gavel-like authority and sounding more like a cornered animal. "This is a family matter. We are doing this for the family name. We can talk about this privately." "We are talking about it now," I said, my voice rising just enough to command the silence. "Because you didn't just try to steal my home. You tried to sell a lie to these people. And it gets worse." Sterling, flip to the second page. I watched as Caleb's father turned the page. His eyes widened. "Caleb, your family was told the family estate, this very house we are sitting in, was part of the security for the marriage. But as of 14 months ago, my parents were facing foreclosure. I bought this house. I saved them. And according to the rental agreement they signed, which they clearly ignored, any attempt to leverage this property for fraud is a breach of contract. The transition in the room was devastating. Caleb's family didn't look at my parents as equals anymore. They looked at them as grifters. They looked at them as people who try to pay for a steak dinner with a stolen credit card. "You don't own this house either?" Sterling asked, his voice dripping with a disgust that was almost visceral. He looked at my father as if he were a bug on a windshield. Richard had no script. The Golden Boy's father had no words. "I am not just keeping my brownstone," I said, looking my father directly in the eye. "Because of this attempted fraud, I am initiating the process to reclaim the family estate. I am the landlord, and you are tenants who have violated the terms of my grace. You have 30 days to find a rental. Since you love gifting things so much, you can gift yourselves a new place to live. The notary is already here. She can witness my signature on the eviction notice." The sound of a story collapsing is very quiet. It's the sound of a latch clicking shut. It's the sound of a mother's breath catching in her throat as she realizes the sweet girl has left the building and the architect has taken over. I walked out of that house for the last time that night. I didn't take the photos of Chloe. I didn't take the memories of Sunday dinners where I was background noise. I went to my brownstone, and I began to pack. I packed 22 years of silence into 11 boxes. Why 11? One for every year I was told to be the support. One for every year I was told my light was too bright for the room. The fallout was swift and total. The wedding was cancelled by Saturday morning. Caleb's family, obsessed with their own status, wanted nothing to do with a family whose wealth was built on the stolen blueprints of a daughter they tried to erase. Chloe, the star, found herself in a cancelled engagement with no dowry and a social standing that had dissolved into a citywide punchline. My parents moved into a small, 2-bedroom rental across the county. Richard hasn't called. He can't look at the person who saved him and then had the audacity to hold him accountable. Diane sends cards sometimes, 3 lines in shaky cursive on cream stationery. I keep them in a drawer. I'm not ready to answer, but I'm not ready to throw them away. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else, it's a door you open when you're ready to walk through it. I'm still standing on the porch, enjoying the view. 6 months later, my life has no shadows. I moved to a new city, opened a new firm with Dr. Marsh as a consultant, and I live in a space where the light hits the floor exactly the way I designed it. I am no longer the invisible support. I am the architect of my own existence. People ask me if I regret what I did. They ask if I miss the family I had. The honest answer is, I miss the family I wished I had. But I would rather be alone in a house I built than be a guest in a home where I am being erased. As we close tonight's reckoning, I want to leave you with 5 rules for protecting your light. 1. Check the deed. Never assume that loyalty is mutual just because you share a last name. Always verify the ownership of your emotional and financial assets. Point 2. Monitor the access. If someone is using your hard work to boost their own status while ignoring your presence, lock the files and change the codes. Point 3. Build an exit. Always have your 11 boxes ready. Freedom is the ability to walk out of a room that no longer sees you without needing their permission to leave. 4. Don't patch a shifted foundation. If the betrayal is structural, if it goes down to the very core of how they see you, don't try to fix it with an apology. Demolish the relationship and rebuild your life on your own terms. Point 5. Speak the math. Lies thrive in the feelings of family. They die in the facts of documentation. When they try to gaslight you, pull out the spreadsheets. Your life is the most important structure you will ever build. It is a load-bearing masterpiece. Don't let people who don't understand the blueprints tell you where the wall should go, and never, ever let them give away the roof over your head. Apologies are just the sound a door makes when it finally unsticks. You belong here. Subscribe to Roast and Reckoning. Share your own truth bomb stories in the comments below. Let's keep the lights on. Good night.